Today we're going to be talking about Melian and how she differs from the other Valar. If you're new here, welcome to Heart of a Halfling. We talk about Lord of the Rings and do some Lord of the Ring things. So let's get started. So this year I've given myself a little reading task to go through 12 different Tolkien books this year, starting with the Silmarillion, going to Beren and Luthien, Children of Hurin, Fall of Gondolin, all so forth, and then ending the year off with the trilogy. So this being June now, I've gone through the Silmarillion, Beren and Luthien, the Children of Hurin, and Fall of Gondolin. And in reading those, I really started to pay attention to Melian, and I understand that she's not exactly a big character really in any of those. She's kind of a side character, so to speak. And she's not even really in the Fall of Gondolin and just a little bit in the Children of Hurin. But there was something that was very striking that really stood out to me in reading these is that she is very different from the rest of the Ainur in whole. So, what I mean by that is that Melion is present in Middle Earth. And while we do see Olmo playing some part in the events of the First Age, it's really Melion who is physically there, who the people in Valerian know, like, hey, there is a Maiar right here. And so I wanted to dig into that a little bit and see what other areas does Melion differ. And kind of a lot. She differs in a lot of different ways, and I think this makes her such an interesting and relatable character. She is the only Maiar that we really see fall in love, right? She like one of her big points is that she married an elf. And while both are immortal, I would venture to say that to Melion, Thingol is kind of mortal. Like he does have an end, whereas she really doesn't. She's sort of outside of time. And Thingol and all the other elves, while they are immortal compared to men, their life is still tied to Arda. So theoretically, when Arda is gone, so are the elves. Like it's kind of, I don't know what happens. And that makes the relationship already sort of different because we do see the Valar marry one another, but it's like beings marrying in the same species, so to speak, or same races. So this auto like right off the bat makes her different. And then even within that relationship, while she does marry Thingol, which is different, she also has kind of a courtship with Thingol, although not in the traditional sense of a courtship where like we don't see them going on dates and getting to know one another, but rather they just spend a very long time holding hands and just being entranced with one another while the trees go around them in Nanomoth. And so that is also different, right? But I think the thing that really is her okay, this is something that none of the Valar, none of the Ainur are going to be able to relate to. Is that she is a child. She has Luthien. And while it's not really talked about, like how long she was pregnant and all of this, and like you can read about that in other books, it is interesting that if she had a child, she conceived and she had a pregnancy. And that within itself is a new experience. Like just being able to carry another being is something that none of the other Ainur can relate to. But also knowing that right off the bat, she is bearing a child that she will outlive. And I think that is a grief and a sorrow that only she knows, that she can comprehend, is that she's going to have like the life that she is growing right now, she will outlive that. However that may look. Even if Luthien stayed an elf, she would still, to some extent and at some point, outlive Luthien because she's not constrained to Arda. She's not constrained to that time frame, I guess. But then even adding on that extra layer of Luthien marrying a mortal and tying herself to Baron means that she was, giving up her elvish lifeline to be man. And that's a whole nother layer on that outliving her daughter, which just, again, is a sorrow that only Melian would have understood, that none of the other Valar would have really understood that feeling or that idea. Because we see that even when Miriel, the mother of Feanor, was dying, they didn't know how to handle that because that was something that they had never understood. And so now looking at Melion, there's no way that they can understand that feeling. Even though death isn't a new concept per se, it is a new form of the life cycle, essentially, that again they wouldn't be able to understand like Melion can. And speaking of Luthien, the fact that we see that her choice is you can either be an elf and come to Valinor, or you can become mortal and live a short time with Baron, right? This was her deal with Mondos to bring Baron back to life, was like you can either just let him go and live here in peace, or you can live a very short life with Baron. And that's the life that she chose. And so therefore was tying her own being to his fate, I guess. And if we look at that dynamic, then we can also look at Melian and see a similar situation of Melion's life being tied to Thingol, which I think makes more sense of why she just suddenly leaves after Thingol dies. When I first read that part, I was a little frustrated with Melian because I was like, why are you leaving so quickly? Like, Thingol is gone. This is kind of the time where people are going to need you. And instead, she just leaves. And I was like, why can't you stay? Couldn't you just stay a little bit longer? And it's like, oh, no, she probably couldn't. Her life was tied to Thingol in a very intimate and personal and life purpose kind of way, that when Thingol was gone, she really didn't have anything else. And so her life force, her life Heather was gone. And so she left to Valinor as well to be with him in the halls of Mondos, right? So these are all feelings and experiences that only Melian can understand. Like she had, while she is a Maiar and Ainur, she lived a quote unquote human life, right? She fell in love, she married, she had a child, and they raised that child together. She had arguments with her husband and disagreements with him, but we also see in that in the Children of Hurin that her and Dingle are off on a little summer vacation. Like she's going on trips with her husband, and then also mourning her child, and then eventually mourning her husband, even if it's in just a small way because of the nature of elves. But she's still mourning, like, oh, he's dead. I'm I don't need to be here anymore. And so all of these are feelings and experiences that only Melion knows, that none of the other divine beings can understand. I also think that this is something that makes Melion so relatable to not only as readers, but also to those living in Middle Earth and living in Beleriand, is having this divine being in their midst living a life that they're living and experiencing similar things as they are, it makes her more tangible to them in a way that the other Valar are not. And then again, we see Elmo occasionally coming in and giving dreams and sort of encouraging people to go in certain directions or sending messages of like, hey, you should do this, but not in the way that Melian is, because she's present. She is there, right? She is counseling Thingol. She is a mentor to Galadriel. She is giving advice to Beleg, to Luthien, to Beren, to anybody that comes in contact with her. She is there answering their questions in the best way that an elf can, right? It's never yes, it's never no. But she's answering them. She's there. She's being a physical present of someone in the divine nature. Now, I understand she's more of a lesser angel, but still, I think when you're in a situation like the elves would have been in Balerion and even the men, when you feel this disconnect from something bigger than yourself, when you see all this destruction around you, even having someone who's a lesser angel around can be a bit of a comfort. And it's not like she was incapable of doing anything. She had a guard around Doriath, right? She was the one holding off on Goliath. Like that's not nothing, you know? So having this great being there, even if she didn't necessarily take part in the battles that were going on, still knowing that she's there, I think would have given some hope and would have still felt a line to Valinor. Even if she doesn't necessarily have a full connection with Valinor, like we see her conversation with Galadriel, that she knows something has happened with the Noldor, but she doesn't know exactly what. It's kind of a haze when she tries to, connect with Valinor. So even though she is not entirely tied to the Valar in the way that she was, it still would have been a comfort, I imagine, to those around knowing that, oh, okay, we do have somebody here. Like, again, even if she doesn't do anything, it's kind of that idea of like just having a police car in front of your house. It can be a deterrent, even if the police officer doesn't do anything, or having the alarm system sign in front of your house can just be enough of a deterrent. It's like just seeing that that is present can be a deterrent and hold things off. And I think that's kind of what Melian is, even if that's unintentional, that just having this great, strong being present is enough to keep at least the really big stuff at bay. Because we don't really see like a big, we don't start seeing the big battle start onslaught come on to Balerion until after the fall of Doriath. And part of that is because of, what's going on with the Silmarils and the Sons of Feanor and everything, and with the fall of Gondolin, of course. But Melian not being present is still a part of that downfall and I guess crescendo to the final big battle with Morgoth. So all of these things I think just makes Melian a very interesting character in that she's just very relatable. She's living a human life when she's not human, when she's not really an elf, but she's living this normal life. And I think that's very interesting and it makes her very relatable. And I imagine she would have been some small beacon of hope to those in Middle Earth. So yeah, so I wanted to share those thoughts with you guys about Melian and how I think she's just a very cool and interesting character. And I hope you guys all enjoyed this. If you have any other thoughts, please leave them in the comments. I love hearing what you guys have to say. But otherwise, I hope you guys have a wonderful, blessed week and may your homes be filled with food and cheer. Bye.